Mr. Nyck, Mr. Nyck, he's our pig, it's Mr. Nyck, yay!
Hey everybody, welcome to the Mr. Nyck Show, and I'm your host, Mr. Nyck. Today, we are going to be learning about the bones in our body. Adults have 206 bones in their bodies, and kids actually have about 300 bones in their bodies. Because as kids get older, some of those bones fuse together, and that's how come we end up with less bones because they just grow together. Let's start off with the first part of the body, and it's the arm. The arm is made up of the upper arm and the lower arm, and they connect together at the elbow joint. The bone that we're going to talk about first is in the upper arm, and it's called the humerus. Insert dad joke here about the humerus being the funniest bone in the body. The lower part of the humerus makes up part of the elbow joint, and the upper part of the humerus makes up part of your shoulder joint. In the lower arm, there are two bones, the radius and the ulna. The ulna is what makes up the elbow joint along with the humerus, and the radius rotates around the ulna when you turn your hand back and forth at the wrist. In your hand, you have 8 bones that are called carpal bones. The first row of carpal bones connect with the radius and ulna to form your wrist joint. Above the second row of carpal bones, you have long bones in your hand that we call metacarpals, and then your fingers are called phalanges. You have 8 carpals, 5 metacarpals, and 14 phalange bones in your hand. People always seem surprised when they hear that the body has 206 bones. But if you take all of the bones in your fingers and hands and just your arm alone, that's 30 bones on one arm and hand. But you have 2 arms and hands, so that's 60 bones out of 206 just in your arms and hands alone. Next, let's talk about the bones in the leg. We'll go from the arm to the leg because the leg is made up very similar to the arm. The first bone that we'll talk about is in the thigh. Your thigh bone is called a femur. The femur makes part of the hip joint at the top and the knee joint at the bottom of the femur. The femur attaches to one of 2 bones in the lower leg to make the knee joint, and that bone is called the tibia. The tibia is a very large bone in the lower leg that is our shin bone. And next to the tibia is a smaller bone called the fibula. And your kneecap that is a bone called the patella. The tibia and fibula at the bottom make up the ankle joint with another bone called the talus. The talus is one of several bones in the foot that we will call tarsals. Just like in your hand and wrist you had bones called carpals, the foot and ankle have bones called tarsals. And just like your hand had 5 long skinny bones called metacarpals, your foot also has 5 long skinny bones called metatarsals. And your toes, like your fingers, are called phalanges. Next, let's talk about the spine. The spine is also called your backbone. It is made up of 24 different bones called vertebrae. There are 7 in your neck, which we call cervical vertebrae. There are 12 throughout your mid-back, which are called thoracic vertebrae. And there are 5 in your low back, which are called lumbar vertebrae. Below your spine, you have a pelvic bone called the sacrum, and below the sacrum is the tailbone, which we call the coccyx. And I said that the sacrum is a pelvic bone. Well, your pelvis is what protects a lot of your insides, and you have 2 more large pelvic bones there, and that is where your femurs come up and attach to your body to make your hip joints. And what are all of these bones coming off of your spine? Those are your ribs. You have 24 ribs. Remember, I said, how do we get to 206 bones in the body? Well, you have 24 ribs alone. They come off of your thoracic vertebrae and they wrap around and attach in the front to a bone called the sternum. The ribs also help protect your insides, your important parts like your lungs and your heart. The next two bones I want to introduce you to, you may call your shoulder blade and your collarbone. The shoulder blade's real name is a scapula, and the collarbone is called the clavicle. The scapula is where the humerus attaches. Remember the humerus? That was the very first bone that we talked about. That attaches to your scapula in order to make your shoulder joint. And your clavicle also helps make up part of your shoulder and is the attachment site of many important muscles. We've worked our way up to the head and face. Now there are many bones in the head and face, so we're going to keep it a little basic here because they're pretty complicated. Your jaw is called a mandible. That is the most movable bone in the face. And the rest of your head has many bones. We'll call it your skull or your cranium. Well, there it is. We went through and talked about so many different bones in the body. Watch this video a few times so you can learn them and impress your parents, your friends, and the rest of your family by talking about the bones and using the proper names for them. Well, I hope you guys have fun with this episode because I know I did. I always like talking about the body and the anatomy because it's just really fun for me. Well, I hope to see you guys next time here on the Mr. Nyck Show. If you like this episode, give it a thumbs up and hit subscribe so you see all the fun episodes that we're doing. And I'll see you guys next time. Bye!
Mr. Nyck, he's our pig. It's Mr. Nyck. Yay!